It seems it was the display of European firepower over and on Greenland's territory in recent days that riled Donald Trump into reaching for his well-worn button marked tariffs. Fellow NATO members, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands and Finland, demonstrating, they say, that they too are serious about Arctic security with a joint military exercise. President Trump saying they were all playing a dangerous game by sending troops for purposes unknown. The stakes, he said, the very survival of the planet. The more immediate consequence, starting on February the 1st, 2026, all of the above-mentioned countries will be charged a 10% tariff on any and all goods sent to the United States of America. On June the 1st, 2026, the tariff will be increased to 25%. Britain sent just one soldier to the exercise, per capita potentially the Army's costliest ever deployment.
The future of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark alone, and it's something that we've communicated to our friends over on the other side of the Atlantic as well. We think these tariffs are wrong and we think they're counterproductive.
The Prime Minister has long played up his closeness to Donald Trump and the trade deal it helped secure as one of the big wins of his premiership.
We just signed a document. This is, sorry about that.
Implementing that deal had already been a struggle. Now it seems not to have been worth the paper it was written on, let alone retrieved from the ground. All the nations targeted by President Trump said today they stood in solidarity with the people of Greenland and with Denmark, that their Arctic endurance exercise expressed a shared transatlantic interest, that it posed no threat. Denmark's Prime Minister accusing Trump of blackmail, its Foreign Minister emphasizing the need to keep talking.
We will stay on track unless US decide differently. But then at the same time, of course, we need the European Union to respond. I will not develop that response at this press conference.
The French president set to ask the EU to impose its so-called bazooka countermeasure, the anti-coercion instrument that would allow the bloc to retaliate not just with tariffs, but with investment restrictions, license suspensions and much else.
We need to approach this with a certain degree of force. It's clear that with Donald Trump, it's no longer about the law, it's about force.
It wouldn't be the first trade war Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary has had to contend with in less than a year in post.
President Trump is being strategic. He's looking beyond this year, he's looking beyond next year to what could happen for a battle in the Arctic. We are not going to outsource our national security. We are not going to outsource our hemispheric security to other countries.
What is the national emergency that justifies these new slate of tariffs?
The national emergency is avoiding a national emergency.
But will such verbal gymnastics fly in the Supreme Court? It could rule as soon as Tuesday on the legality of Trump's emergency justification for much of his tariff policy.
Most likely what he's relying on is what's called IEPA, the Emergency Powers Act. This is an act that doesn't mention the word tariff and requires a national emergency. As someone who's been safely living through not owning Greenland for a long, long time, this doesn't feel like an emergency, but that's a question for the courts. But yes, what is currently before the courts and roughly a 2 in 3 chance to be ruled unconstitutional, that's the threat that Trump is using right now.
Last year, Vice President Vance visited US troops in Greenland. Trump has already rejected the Danish suggestion of simply scaling up their numbers, leaving Denmark and Europe little to offer beyond capitulation. The incentive is clear: to wait for the Supreme Court ruling. For a view on Russia's reactions, instructive to look at the X feed of Kirill Dmitriev, the main envoy in Ukraine talks with Washington. He spent the day mocking EU leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas for living in Biden world, postulating that Trump's middle finger from last week is now brandished in the direction of Britain and Europe. It is now the frozen ground of Greenland more than Ukraine that's testing NATO's bonds to their limits. What Russia did by military force to a declared enemy, the US now attempting through economic power against an ally, the annexation of its sovereign territory.
Harry Fawcett reporting there. Well, joining me now are Lars Christian Brask, the Deputy Speaker of the Danish Parliament, who's in Roskilde, and from Nuuk, the Greenlandic politician Tilly Martinussen. Thanks very much for joining us. Tilly Martinussen, to you first. We spoke to you a couple of weeks ago when it was clear how angry, how upset you were. This has escalated since then, not de-escalated. I just wonder how Greenlanders are reacting to what's happening now.
We have seen the largest scale demonstration ever. It was even beating the 1975 notorious and famous Women's March protests yesterday. So it has been nationwide, even in very small settlements. People have been taken to the streets and protesting. But Nuuk was really crazy. I think it was about a quarter of the people living here that was actually on the streets, even though it was slippery and raining yesterday. Of course, people still don't want to be a part of America. Everyone understands that we would like to still stay allies with America, but I also think that people are a little fed up with all of the ruckus that is coming about, not from the Europeans who are supporting us very much, and of course Denmark has been by our side, so happy about that. But yeah,
and briefly,
are really tired of.
Sorry, and briefly, what would you describe the sort of prevailing sentiment? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it betrayal?
I think people are just tired. I'm sorry to say so, but really, it's a very small nation. We're used to being kept out of foreign affairs, of course, because of our ties with Denmark and with America also. And now all of a sudden we're kind of in a hurricane up here, and our Kisomi is blowing up, and we have journalists everywhere, and we're not used to that. So I think first and foremost, people are tired. I think they're a little scared. I also think that they are very happy that the European Union, and especially Denmark, is still backing us. We're so grateful for that.
I mean, Lars Christian Brask, that is you. Initially, the president made the argument that this was all about security, but in the last couple of weeks, he's been saying owning Greenland is a sort of psychological issue for him. Does that make it even harder to fight him on a rational basis?
Absolutely, yes. And we have been in a situation where it's been the security that was the important argument. Being able to take missiles.
I'm sorry, I think the line is really bad. We'll try to settle it briefly if we can. Tilly Martinussen, if I could come back to you. You're saying you're very happy at the support you're getting from Denmark. You're very happy at the support you're getting from EU leaders. But it has to be more than words, doesn't it?
At this point, I think words are actually pretty brave. So right now, what we need is the support. What's important to Greenlanders, I think, is to make sure that we get through to the American people, because, of course, Danish soldiers and Greenlandic soldiers in the Danish Defense Army has been fighting alongside America and have been bleeding, and we have lost people in America side by side with our American brethren and sisters. And I think it's very important, at least to Greenlanders, that we make sure that the American military personnel are hearing that they're trying to talk about taking over a NATO country, which is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And I have to say the majority of Greenlanders wants to stay with Denmark.
Let me try and go back to Lars Christian Brask. I mean, what is the challenge for you and for other European leaders now? Because Donald Trump shows no sign of backing down on this.
Stay firm on united union and united pressure and non-acceptance of what comes from the White House.
But when you say non-acceptance, that doesn't sound very tough. I mean, you need something more practical than that, don't you? I mean, are you in favour of reciprocal tariffs, for example? President Macron's idea of triggering this sort of anti-coercion tool.
Yeah, the anti-coercion tool is not under my mandate, and that's why the EU ambassadors are talking at the moment, if that's an option, as Macron has wished. But we clearly have to punch the bully on the nose. That is what is needed when you're dealing with a bully. And we've had enough of betrayal. We've had enough of misinformation. Greenland and Denmark, we are part of Kingdom of Denmark, and we stand together. And we're not going to have any threats or any further threats or acquisition or control. It's simply not on.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Sorry about the line breakup. Tilly Martinussen and Lars Christian Brask, thank you very much for talking to us. Well, what kind of economic impact can we expect? The US is the UK's biggest single export market, and President Trump's tariffs last April wiped billions off our economy as exports to the US were squeezed, with the drugs, chemical and car manufacturing industries particularly vulnerable. Earlier, I spoke to the Provost of King's College, Cambridge, and Financial Times columnist Gillian Tett, and asked her what can be done to quench Trump's interests in owning Greenland.
Well, they basically have three choices at this point. They can either keep their heads down and just try and hope and pray it goes away. And in many ways, that's what European leaders have been doing for the last year. And the result is they've looked very weak. And so, as you know, with a playground bully, if you just let a bully you, they're going to bully even more. And this has been happening. So they can just carry on, or they can try and appease him by cutting some kind of deal around Greenland, which most European leaders don't want to do because that really would rip up the rules-based order. Or they can try and stand up to him and go strong. Now, there are signs that they're planning to stand up to him and go strong. I suspect some of the meetings in Davos this week are going to be pretty tough. President Trump is arriving on Wednesday by helicopter, of course, and he'll be doing a number of bilateral meetings and multilateral meetings. But the question about whether the European leaders have got the stomach to really stand up to him is still hanging in the balance.
And I mean, that suggestion you make about going strong, is that only reciprocal tariffs?
It could also be something more dramatic, like essentially trying to take moves to keep American companies or banks out of the European financial system, or slap more punishment on European companies. Now, the European leaders don't want to go there. They really don't. Most of them still believe in global cooperation and some kind of free trade. But the challenge is that if they don't act strongly and stand up to him, he's going to keep sort of simply trying to push it further and further. And it's also not just about Greenland. I mean, we've had some remarkable comments from Steve Bannon come out in the last 24 hours, reflecting the view of many people around Trump, which is that Canada also has to be under US control in some form to ensure what they regard as American security.
I mean, that issue of a robust response, you know, European countries that were singled out by Trump did issue this statement, and they said tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. The problem is, does Donald Trump care?
There was a quip that went around the financial markets last year called TACO, which is Trump always chickens out, which is that he announces something dramatic with some kind of bullying bluster, but quite often he then backs down. And we actually saw that with the tariffs that were announced last April, that after all the shock and drama, in fact, many of those tariffs were subsequently watered down. So many people think that this is just a dramatic negotiating ploy. But the problem is that if the Europeans don't come together as a united front and show that they're going to try and, if not hit back, but stand up to him, he's likely to do that over and over again.
And if these tariffs go ahead, let's look at that scenario. What would that mean for the UK and across Europe?
The bottom line is that tariffs are bad for business and bad for economies. Now, the good news about the British economy is that much of it's based around services, not trading goods, and services are not covered by these tariffs yet. However, none of this is good for the economy in Europe, or I should say in America either. And so we have to hope that this, frankly, insanity doesn't keep accelerating going forward.
Because the uncertainty it's bringing is pretty much bad for everyone, isn't it?
What's happening right now is a bit like a cancer. It's not so much like a heart attack, it's like a cancer. And the cancer of uncertainty, of fear, of friction in trade, all of that basically makes our economic health decline quite significantly. So no, there hasn't been a dramatic cataclysmic collapse or anything like that, but we just don't need this kind of sickness in our global economy right now.
Gillian Tett, thanks very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now is the former British ambassador to the US, Sir Peter Westmacott. Sir Peter, we've had the supportive statement from Sir Keir Starmer and other EU leaders for Denmark and Greenland. But what should they do now?
Well, yes, that statement is good, and it does talk very firmly about the danger of a downward spiral, as you were just saying. We are in uncharted territory. I noticed that John Bolton Donald Trump's former national security advisor says this is, the worst we've ever seen, and he, in the 5 years that we've had him as president. And some of the stuff in the post which he put on Truth Social yesterday was frankly nonsensical when he talks about we have been subsidizing the Danes and the Europeans by not charging them tariffs until now. I mean, this is economic drivel. So it's a very strange position to be in. He then jumps very quickly from that to an issue of alleged national security. I think part of the problem is that he was annoyed by the very modest show of support, not a show of force, it was too small for that, the show of support from NATO countries who sent some of their soldiers to Greenland, and that he probably thought was mildly insulting. But the problem we've got, apart from the vanity, if you like, is that he is on a bit of a roll at the moment. He saw what he was able to do in Venezuela. That seems to have gone down quite well, even with a MAGA base which is not keen on wars abroad. And so we've got to a moment when even the British government is taking a firm line with its European allies, saying we won't put up with this. So we have got to the stage, there's been a lot of talk thrown around about standing up to the playground bully. That is correct. With somebody like this, if you do not stand up to him, he will keep pushing. He has nothing but contempt for weakness. When people like the Chinese and the Brazilians have stood up to him on tariffs, he did back down. But TACO, Trump always chickens out, only applies when he's up against somebody strong or somebody he's scared of.
But
he doesn't
tricky,
stand up to Vladimir Putin, for example.
But that is tricky, isn't it? You talk about the PM or, European leaders, the UK leader taking a tough line, a stand against him. We're told that the PM is, hoping to have a phone call with him soon after the attack on Venezuela. Keir Starmer, his call wasn't put through for 4 days. There's a real question here about whether all the courting of Donald Trump has got the UK anywhere in terms of influence.
Well, it's a fair point, but the tactic that the UK government has used, which is, let's talk to him in private rather than call him out in public, I think was sensible. And we used our soft power, to coin a phrase, to maximum effect with the invitation of Donald Trump to come and pay a second state visit. He clearly loved that. But what have we got in return? The answer is not much, not a very good trade deal, not support for Ukraine, which is what we would like. And now we've had this thrown at us. So I do think it is important, necessary for the government to say, well, what are we going to do? And clearly the statement that we've come out with today and the statement the Prime Minister produced yesterday saying this is completely wrong is a change of tone and is a reflection of just how serious this kind of aggressive territorial acquisitive language is taken in London as well as in other capitals. So I think so far it hasn't got us very far. There was always going to be a moment, I think, with President Trump when you had to make a stand, and that moment is clearly now, and we're doing that with our European allies. But the trouble is that the government cannot afford to, if you like, get into a public disagreement calling each other names as long as we need Donald Trump to make the right judgment calls on Ukraine. And at the moment, that's not in the bag at all. He is much more in awe of President Putin than we would like, and not yet strong enough in his determination to support us.
Sorry to cut across you, Sir Peter,
in
but
helping Ukraine.
Very briefly, what does that tough stand look like? Practically, beyond the language.
What are the options? We can review the trade policy that we've got there. We can look at the trade deal with America. We can look afresh at where do we source our weapons. The United Kingdom buys almost everything from America. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. We should be showing more European solidarity in terms of the defence of the promotion of our defence industries. And we should work more closely with the Europeans, even though we're outside the EU.
So, Peter, got to leave it there, but thanks so much for talking to us. Thank you.
All right.